In 2025, I walked across the stage in my college graduation gown and saw my brother in the back row, the one who disappeared 19 years earlier. No announcement, no contact. Just a thin man in a second-hand blazer holding the same sketchbook he used to draw in before he vanished. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He just stood there like he'd been waiting for something, maybe for me to notice. And when I did everything I'd spent years learning how to bury came rising up at once. I don't remember what song they played. I remember his eyes. Before I go any further, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. And if stories like this ever touched your life or your town, go ahead and tap that like and subscribe. Every click helps bring another missing name back into the light. My name's Rachel Delaney. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, right where the Blue Ridge dips low and green, where the air smells like pine and rain in the summer. I was just a toddler when my brother Josh disappeared, so I never had full memories of him. But he was still there in photo frames, in bedtime stories, in the way my mom left the porch light on every night like it was a lighthouse for someone lost at sea. We were the kind of family that didn't talk much about pain. My dad fixed things. My mom worked night shifts and left sandwiches in the fridge with our names on them. I learned early how to keep the peace, how to sit quiet during dinner and finish my homework without being asked twice. For a long time, I thought that's what normal was. You went to school, you didn't ask too many questions, and you learned how to read a room before you walked into it. That porch light it was always left on when someone was late blinked twice for dinner and 3 times when a storm was rolling in. It was a kind of language in our house. I didn't ask about the night Josh left until I was about 12. By then, I knew not to bring it up around my dad. He'd stiffen like someone had reached into the past and grabbed him by the throat. Mom just said he was gentle in ways the world isn't kind to and left it there. But there were little things that stayed. His room was always vacuumed but untouched. Dad never threw out his baseball glove. And Mom kept a white rose in a vase on the table every time we gathered, even when no one said why. In high school, I started keeping my own sketch pad, not to draw, but to try and understand what my brother might have seen in those hills he used to walk. He loved the mountains, that much I knew. He'd sketch them like they were alive with names and moods and secrets of their own. Some nights I'd sit on the porch alone and watch that light flicker, wondering if maybe it still meant something. The day of my graduation, June 7th, 2025. The gym was packed and sticky with heat. You could smell floor wax and popcorn from the concession stand. I wore a pressed gown and a bobby pin that wouldn't stay in place. When they called my name, I stepped forward. I smiled for the photo. Then I turned to face the bleachers, and I saw him. Older, thinner, worn down by something that hadn't let go of him. But it was Josh. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. He just stood there holding that old black sketchbook like it was the only thing keeping him tethered. And for the first time in my life, I knew what it felt like to remember someone who never left your heart. That night, something was slipped under my door. A single page, drawn in crosshatch ink. Me standing on stage, and Josh's view from the back row. The porch light blinked once, then again. And I realized he hadn't just come back to see me walk across a stage. He came back because someone else might have been watching too. The night after the graduation, I couldn't sleep. I laid the sketchbook page flat on my desk, turned it under the light, studied the way Josh had drawn me from the back row, the curve of my shoulders, the sweep of the tassel. You could see the principal's posture stiff with habit and the faint glow of fairy light strung across the gym rafters. It was more than a drawing. It was proof he had been there, that he'd seen everything. But the detail that wouldn't leave me alone was the row number at the bottom RD7. That was where my mom had been sitting. It wasn't something you could guess from a photograph. He'd known. That level of closeness. It made the silence feel louder. I set the paper down and moved to the window. Rain was still falling in that slow, steady way that soaks the soil. 2 houses down, a car idled without headlights. I couldn't see who was inside, but something about the angle, the way it hadn't moved in over an hour, it sat wrong with me. My phone buzzed around midnight. A number I didn't recognize. One word. Lights. I stood by the switch, hesitating. That code, it had always meant something in our family. I flicked it off, then on, then off again. A minute passed, another buzz. This time, saw, not safe. Tomorrow, same time. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. The next morning, I didn't tell my parents. I wanted to, but I didn't. I think I needed to hold that contact close a little longer. Like if I said it out loud, it would vanish. I pulled out the old storage box from the back of my closet, the one where Mom had saved some of Josh's things. An old Polaroid, a folded-up flyer from a 9th grade art show, a library card from before he vanished. I laid the new sketch beside them. The lines were heavier now. You could see the weight in his hand. When Detective Alvarez knocked later that day, he didn't come with backup or a patrol car. Just a hat in his hand, and a quiet look like he already knew what I hadn't told anyone. I let him in. I showed him the sketch. He studied it, finger resting lightly on the RD7 in the corner. "He's steering the pace," he said. "This is contact, not closure. Keep everything. Date it." My dad came in right as I handed Alvarez the paper. His face drained the second he saw the drawing. "You let him in?" he asked. "No," I said. "It was under my door." He looked toward the street like Josh might still be out there waiting to come in through the garage or the side gate. If he wanted to come home, my dad said he'd knock. Alvarez didn't answer him. He looked at me instead. "Tonight," he said, "if you feel safe, use the light. But only the light." His voice wasn't patronizing, just measured. I think he knew not to press too hard. Before he left, he told me where he'd been when the tip line lit up sitting through his niece's graduation. "Seemed better to find you in the rain," he said, "than in front of a row of grandparents." That night, the three of us sat in the kitchen and pretended to have dinner. Mom had brought home takeout and set out plates we didn't touch. The porch light threw a circle onto wet steps. I watched the rain until it blurred the world beyond the window. When I went upstairs, I folded my graduation gown and laid it across the chair. As I turned to grab my bag, I saw it. Another sketchbook page, tucked under my bedroom door. This one showed a wider view, the gym stage, the audience, the fairy lights. And there I was again, smaller this time, caught mid-step. The detail was precise. It was how he used to draw, like he was listening through his eyes. On the back, in blocky, deliberate letters, "I'm sorry I missed you. I won't risk a scene. I'll try again when it's quiet." I pressed my fingers to the paper. Downstairs, I flipped the porch switch, once paused, then twice. Seconds later, another text. "Saw. Not safe. Tomorrow, same time." I didn't sleep. Every sound was too sharp, every car too close. I waited until the sky turned pale before finally shutting my eyes. By morning, my mom had left for an extra shift. My dad wandered into the garage and didn't come back for hours. I stayed inside, kept the sketchbook close. When Alvarez knocked again, I let him in without a word. He saw the new drawing and gave a slow nod. "He wants you to know he was close enough to count," he said. My dad came in behind us and froze when he saw the sketch on the table. That line, he said, his voice catching. He always pressed too hard. It wasn't much, but it cracked something open in the room. I saw the edge of grief in my father's face that I'd never seen before, something not angry or guarded, just real. Alvarez caught it too. Didn't press, just filed it away. "If anything feels wrong tonight," he told me, "turn the porch light on and leave it on. That's as loud as a shout." That afternoon, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Someone claimed they'd seen Josh bussing tables downtown months ago. Another posted a grainy photo of a man in a raincoat at the library. Comments piled up like heat. I turned off notifications and went to the one place that felt right, the 3rd floor of the public library. I found the 2006 yearbook and pulled it down. The spine cracked open like an old promise. I found his photo in the art club section, same half-closed mouth, same far-off eyes. Someone had sketched mountains in the margin, fresh graphite. I touched the page. It was warm. When I looked away just for a second, a note had appeared on the table. Out back. 5 minutes. No police. I followed the exit signs and stepped into the alley behind the building. He was waiting thinner than I remembered from the gym. Same blazer, same sketchbook pressed to his ribs like it was keeping him upright. "I didn't mean the gym," he said quietly. "I thought I could see you and go." I asked him why he left a drawing. "So you'd know it was me." He looked around, nervous. "I can't stay." "Why not?" "Because I'm not the only one watching our porch. Who's Silver Sedan? Last 2 nights. Not a cop." He pulled an envelope from the sketchbook, a bus stub from Boone, a diner punch card, a shelter intake form under a different name, a library card from a state away, and a Polaroid from a 9th grade art show with a newer date stamped crooked in the corner. "Tell Mom I'm alive," he said. "Not dead. Not yet." A car door slammed nearby. He flinched. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "If the lights are safe." Then he was gone back through the green into the alley's far edge. I stood there for a long time, listening to nothing. When I went back upstairs, another note had appeared on the open yearbook. "Check page 217. At the bottom of the page were 2 rectangles like tiny light switches. Underneath a single word, jar, and a time, 2:17 a.m. That night I stayed up, watched the porch. My phone buzzed once at exactly 2:17, ready. I flicked the switch twice. Across the street a lighter flared. Then a silver sedan rolled to the curb and stopped. A second message, this one from a different number. "Do not open the door." I stood behind the curtain heart, knocking against my ribs, and watched as a tall man stepped from the car, set something on the bottom step, and left. When the headlights were gone, I opened the door and reached out. A black sketchbook. Josh's. The frayed band. The weight of it. I brought it inside, locked the door, and opened it flat on the kitchen table. Inside the cover was a drawing of our porch light. Below it 2 squares marked on and off, and beneath them a single sentence for Alvarez. I remembered the sedan I'd seen earlier that day, parked facing the wrong way with one headlight dimmer than the other. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now it felt like a lens. I texted Alvarez just a period, our silent code for, "I'm about to do something you won't like but can't stop." Then I slid a folded sheet from under the sketchbook's cover, a list of intersections and dates, years boiled down to coordinates. At the bottom, in Josh's hand, "If anything happens to me, give this to Alvarez." I pressed the book to my chest. Outside, I could hear a car shifting gears. Something had changed. Not just in the story we told ourselves, but in what was coming next. Alvarez sat at the kitchen table, the sketchbook open between us. He hadn't touched it with gloves yet, he just looked at it like it might vanish if he blinked too hard. Mom stood by the counter with her arms wrapped around herself, not saying a word. Dad paced a slow circuit near the front window, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw working the way it always did when he didn't have a solution. The folded list of intersections was still resting beneath the cover untouched. I think all 3 of us were waiting for someone else to start. When I finally spoke, it came out quieter than I expected. "Why would he trust you?" I asked. "He doesn't even know you." Alvarez didn't flinch. "Because someone told him I lost my daughter," he said. "He knows I don't dismiss ghosts." That made my father stop mid-step. "This isn't a ghost story," he snapped. "My son walked out. 19 years. He can walk back in." I pressed the sketchbook flat on the table, smoothed the spine. "He says someone's watching the house." I kept my voice even. "That car. It's been parked out there on and off for days. Alvarez nodded without looking away from the page. Wrong side of the street. Engine too quiet. They want him boxed in. Or they want you rattled. Mom finally spoke. Then why come back at all? Her voice cracked on the last word. Alvarez didn't answer right away. He let the silence settle like he was giving her time to hear it herself. Maybe he's done running, he said. Or maybe whoever's chasing him finally made home feel safer than away. He lifted the list of coordinates, traced a few lines with his pen. These are intersections, transit stops, motels, a diner in Boone. He's not just leaving breadcrumbs. He's logging a pattern. I touched one of the printed entries, a bus depot from 2013. He's leaving us a map. Alvarez folded the paper again and tucked it back beneath the cover. Tonight, he said we don't blink the light. If he comes, we let him decide the pace. That didn't sit right with Dad. He slammed his palm against the edge of the counter. You're not making this house a sting operation. Alvarez didn't flinch. It already is. You just haven't admitted it yet. No one answered. Even the house seemed to go quiet after that. The rain had stopped, but the damp was still in the walls, the kind that soaks into the trim and stays there. You could smell it, wet concrete, something faint and sweet beneath it like lilacs left too long in a vase. That night, I didn't leave the kitchen. I kept the sketchbook in front of me, pages splayed like the wings of something still learning how to land. The text came in just before 10. You have it. Good. Stay inside. Do not trust the car. It didn't say who it was from, but I recognized the rhythm. I typed a single word. Safe. 3 dots pulsed. Then nothing. I closed the phone, listened to the quiet. Upstairs, the attic access still had the old pull cord from when we were kids. I climbed up past insulation and the faint smell of dust and cardboard and found the old trunk under a slant of roof. Inside, buried beneath baseball gloves and tangled Christmas lights, was another sketchbook, one I hadn't seen before. The first page showed a boy on a bike mountain ridge, behind him porch light in the distance. Dated July 2006, 2 weeks before he disappeared. Alvarez joined me a few minutes later, flashlight steady. He leaned over my shoulder and nodded at the page. He stashed this before he left, he said. Proof he planned it. I didn't know whether to feel relief or grief, so he meant to disappear. Not forever, Alvarez said. Just long enough to breathe. We both froze at the same moment. A car door. Not ours. I inched toward the vent at the side of the attic and peered out. The silver sedan was parked under the streetlight again. 2 figures inside. Still. Waiting. Alvarez joined me at the vent. They know he came back. The next night, Alvarez parked 3 blocks away and cut through backyards. I waited by the window with the porch light off, curtains pulled just wide enough to catch the shape of the car. At 10:14, the bulb over the door flickered. Once, then twice. I hadn't touched the switch. Alvarez rushed in from the side yard, breathing hard. I opened the door. No one at the switch. Then we followed the cord. It trailed from the porch across the lawn into the hedges. Someone had wired the porch light to a remote. Before we could say anything, a voice came from behind us. Don't panic. Josh stepped out of the dark, hands up. The blazer was the same, but his face looked thinner than it had in the gym. More drawn. It's me. Alvarez pulled him inside and shut the door fast. Dad was waiting in the living room. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at him like the air had gone heavy. Then the words came sharp. You think you can just walk in here after 19 years? Mom pressed her hand over her mouth, tears already falling. Josh held up the sketchbook like a shield. I don't have time. They're watching. They've been following me since Boone. Every stop, every place I stayed, always one step behind. I stepped closer. Who, I don't know. I never saw faces, Just the car. Same rhythm. Sometimes they'd disappear for weeks. Then they'd show up again. Like they were letting me think I was free. Alvarez spread out the map of dates and places. These people leave traces. You've given us a trail. I didn't give you a trail, Josh said. I gave you bait. If they think I trust you, maybe they'll blink. Dad let out a bitter laugh. This is paranoia. You've always been dramatic. Josh looked straight at him. I left because you wouldn't see me. Now strangers do. The room went silent. Not out of shock, just the weight of something landing that none of us could dodge. Mom whispered, "What do they want?" Josh flipped to a page I hadn't seen before. A drawing of a door. Not our door. A basement door padlocked. A number written above it. 9-1 Alvarez leaned in. His whole posture changed. That's a case file. Girl went missing in Asheville. 13. Same year you vanished. I felt my stomach turn. You knew her. Josh's voice was low. She wasn't the only one. I was cutting through an alley behind the bus station the night I left. Heard crying. Thought it was nothing. Then I saw the door. Chained shut. I knocked. Crying stopped. Then headlights hit the alley and I ran. He looked down. A few weeks later, I saw her face on a poster. Alvarez's jaw was tight. And you didn't tell anyone I was 15? I thought if I said something they'd ask where I'd been, why I didn't call. I thought it would kill Mom to know I'd been that close and ran. I felt something shift inside me. So you carried that for 19 years, and they carried me, he said. Watched. Waited. Just to see if I'd talk. Before anyone could respond, the silver sedan's headlights flared through the curtain. We dropped low. Tires crunched on gravel. Alvarez reached for his radio. Josh shoved the sketchbook into my hands. If they get me, don't stop reading. Every page is a door. And then the porch light blinked again. This time, no one was near the switch. Across the room, shadows stretched and shifted as the car idled. Outside, a tall figure stepped from the passenger side, walked to the mailbox, dropped something, got back in. No words, no noise, just tires sliding over wet pavement. Alvarez ran out too late to get a plate. The envelope he carried back in was thick. Photos spilled out. Josh at bus stops, libraries, shelters, some from over a decade ago. Every angle suggested surveillance. None of it felt random. One photo stopped my breath. Josh at 17 Eyes Hollow walking out of a store. Dated October 2007, 2 months after that girl went missing. They've never stopped, he said. Alvarez studied the photo, then the envelope. These aren't warnings. They're records. And now they've let us know we're being watched too. I wanted to believe it was overblown. But something about the silence after he said it made it impossible to doubt. In the next moment, I knew we hadn't found safety. We'd tripped a wire, and whatever came next was already on its way. The photographs stayed on the table long after Alvarez had finished sorting them, their edges curling slightly from the damp in the air. No one spoke. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum quieter than usual, like the house was waiting for something. Josh sat slouched near the wall, not looking at any of us, just holding the last page of his sketchbook like he wasn't sure if he should keep it or burn it. My mom leaned against the back of a dining chair, hand wrapped around the white rose she hadn't let go of since graduation night. My dad hadn't moved from the far end of the room, arms folded, staring at Alvarez like he was part of whatever had broken us. The silence felt different than before. Not tense exactly. Not relieved. Just worn out. When Emily finally asked, "What do we do now?" the question landed flat. Not empty, but too full to carry an answer. Alvarez's voice stayed level. We don't chase them. We don't turn on each other. We don't blink unless we have to. He gathered the envelope, the surveillance photos, the drawing of the padlocked basement door. They've been circling him for almost 2 decades. They know this house. They know your names. But what they don't know yet is where we stand." My dad shook his head. "What does that even mean?" Josh spoke without looking up. "It means I'm not theirs anymore." His voice was hoarse. "Not unless we give them a reason." Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The sketchbook was back in my lap, pages flipping one by one, each place drawn from memory. Bus stations, alleys, diners, waiting rooms, rest stops with broken clocks and vending machines that didn't take change anymore. Some had dates, some just had times. The handwriting shifted over the years, early pages sharp and exact, later ones heavier, like the pencil had started pushing through. I traced the drawing of the basement door again. I kept trying to imagine the moment he heard that girl crying, how close he must have been, how long he must have wondered if he should have gone back. I don't know if I would have at 15. I think that's what stayed with me the most. Not that he left, but that he carried it in silence for so long. When morning came, no one talked about plans. Mom made eggs, but no one touched them. Alvarez came by mid-morning in plain clothes and kept his badge in his pocket. He brought files, local maps, and an old manila folder with the number 917 on the tab. He said the name of the missing girl, but I won't repeat it here. Just that she was 13, disappeared 2 months after Josh left home, lived a few blocks from the alley near the bus station, and that her case was still listed as open but cold. He pinned her photo to the bulletin board he'd started setting up in our dining room. My dad wasn't happy about that, but he didn't stop him either. Later, Alvarez handed me a list, said it was every address connected to the coordinates Josh had given places he'd stayed, places he thought he'd been watched from. One was a gas station in Boone. Another was a diner with no name on the receipt, just a 4-digit code and a handwritten total. I looked closer. The code matched the last 4 numbers of the sedan's license plate. Josh confirmed it without even glancing up. That's where I saw them the first time. 2009. I thought I was imagining it. My dad crossed his arms. "So you've got 2 sightings and a drawing of a door. That's not evidence. It's coincidence." Alvarez didn't rise to it. "No one said it's a closed case, but when coincidences show a pattern, we follow the pattern." My dad turned to Josh. "Why come back now? After all this time? Why bring this home?" Josh met his eyes for the first time in hours. "Because I thought maybe a milestone would be enough to forgive the time I missed." He didn't raise his voice. "Because I saw the date on the calendar, and I thought maybe I could stand in the back row and still be part of something." Mom reached for his hand, but stopped halfway. "We're still your family," she whispered. "Even after all this." Then why he said, "Do I still feel like a guest?" No one answered. The next evening, Alvarez stayed late. The sedan hadn't returned, but we all felt it out there just beyond the edges of town, watching for a flicker in the porch light. I tried to draw that feeling once when I was a kid, the sense that someone could be waiting just past the curve of the street, not moving, not reaching, just waiting. I hadn't thought about that sketch in years. I found it in a folder in my closet. It wasn't good. I was 12, but the feeling was the same. Alvarez looked at it and didn't say anything, just nodded once like he understood. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A new number. One line, "Don't trust him." A second line appeared before I could reply. He already knew about 917. I showed it to Alvarez. His face didn't change, but his eyes flicked once to the corner of the room. "They're trying to split us," he said. My dad seized on that. "Of course they are. You show up out of nowhere. This kid," he pointed at Josh, "shows up after 19 years, drops a sketchbook and some pictures on our table, and we're just supposed to trust the detective who happens to be at the graduation." Alvarez didn't argue. He just stood there letting the silence settle again. Josh broke it first. "He's right. They've been using our porch code. How else would they know my mom stepped in between them? We can't turn on each other. That's what they want. Josh reached for the sketchbook and flipped to a new page. A gas station logo drawn from memory. This is where I saw the car again. Boone, 2009. Alvarez went through one of his files. There was another missing person from Boone that year. 19. Male. Worked nights at a station just outside town. I stared at the pinboard. The 3 cases, the girl, the gas station clerk, and Josh, all traced back to overlapping points. The basement door, the alley, the sedan, the timing. A triangle that ended in Asheville. My dad muttered something under his breath. I couldn't make it out. Alvarez looked at me. You see it? I nodded. It's not finished. He exhaled through his nose. No, but it's forming. Just before midnight, something thumped against the station window where Alvarez had started sleeping between shifts. He called us. When we arrived, he was holding an envelope. No postmark, no return address. Inside a single Polaroid, our porch light, lit, and beneath it written in block letters, "You're next." My mom's hand went to her mouth again. My dad finally sat down like something in him had bent without breaking. Josh stood behind all of us. His voice was steady when he said, "Now they want us scared." Alvarez placed the photo on the table and spread the sketchbook beside it. Or maybe they're scared of what we'll find next. The porch light stayed on the rest of that night, but none of us looked out the window. Not once. It was just after noon when Alvarez laid the sketchbook flat and pointed to a single corner of a page I hadn't noticed before. At first glance, it was just another street scene. Ink lines forming the edge of a sidewalk, the curve of a gutter, a broken signpost. But then I saw the detail tucked into the bottom margin. A date I didn't recognize and 2 words written smaller than the rest, "Old Jar." I asked what it meant. Josh leaned over, squinted at the corner, and shook his head. That's not what I called it. I just remember the smell. Grease salt, something burnt into the air. He paused, then added, "The kind of place where someone might forget your face the moment you walked out." Alvarez sat back. "We've been looking for evidence," he said. "Maybe we should have been looking for a place with no memory." That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. I pulled out every receipt, post-it diner coupon Josh had saved in the envelope he'd given me. Most were from towns I didn't know, but one stood out. A half-punched loyalty card from a grill off Route 70. No logo, no address, just 1 word stamped in red block letters. Jar. The card had 2 punches. I looked at the date on the back, March 2010. Josh didn't remember it clearly. Could have been Boone, he said. Could have been closer. Alvarez asked if he'd ever noticed anyone following him before or after. Josh nodded slowly. There was a man 2 booths behind me. Never ate. Just sat there with a newspaper that never turned pages. I thought maybe he was waiting on someone. But when I left, he left too. I didn't know what we were supposed to do with that. It had been 15 years. But Alvarez took down the note, copied the address from the punch card, and told us he'd check it in the morning. I stayed up that night listening for the porch light, even though it didn't blink. No one spoke at breakfast. Dad read the paper but didn't flip the pages. Mom wiped the counters twice with no crumbs in sight. Josh sat with his back to the window, his eyes shifting every time a car passed too slow on the street. Around 1100, Alvarez came back with coffee and a map folded in quarters. Jar Cafe, he said. Name changed 6 years ago, but it's still there. Different owners now, but same layout. Same street. He looked at Josh. You sketched it from memory. Pretty close, too. Josh didn't answer. He just traced a circle on the table with his thumb. There's something else, Alvarez added. City records show that the property next door to the cafe used to be a supply shop. Vacant now. Burned partially in 2012. But before that, it shared a basement foundation. My mom's face tightened. "You think it's connected? I don't know yet," he said. "But the date on that card puts Josh there within a few months of another missing person report young woman, 19, traveling through the area on her way to Chapel Hill. She was never found." My dad stood up, then walked to the sink and stared out the window. "So we just sit here, wait for another envelope to show up." Alvarez closed the sketchbook. "No. We let the evidence lead, but we don't push until we know where it goes." That afternoon I dug back into the attic, not because I expected to find anything new, but because I needed to feel like I was doing something. I found a box I hadn't seen in years, labeled in Josh's handwriting. Inside were old yearbooks, a shoebox full of ticket stubs, and beneath that a folded map of North Carolina with pencil marks scattered across the highways. Most of the marks had small initials beside them. JM, MG, LT dates written next to some others left blank. I brought it downstairs. Josh looked at it and went quiet for a long time. "Those are the ones I met on the road," he said finally. "Not all of them, just the ones who stuck in my mind. A few disappeared. A few were never really there to begin with. One of them gave me a fake name and still managed to feel realer than half the people I knew growing up." I asked what the initials meant. "Just what I could remember," he said. "Places where they said they were headed, who they might have been." He pointed to one dot near Asheville. "This one." She was gone before I finished my coffee. That night I copied the entire map into a notebook. Every initial, every date. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but it felt like something had shifted. The next day, Alvarez called from a library 3 towns over. He'd requested public records tied to the old Jar Cafe address. One file came back flagged an anonymous complaint from 2011 about unusual deliveries being made late at night through the back alley. No follow-up, no citation, just a note from the responding officer. No visible activity upon arrival. We spent the evening at the dining room table again, but this time the tension was different. It wasn't about blame, it was about volume. How much information we suddenly had, and how little of it made sense. At one point, Josh opened the sketchbook again and turned to a page that looked blank at first. Then he tilted it toward the light, and I saw it tiny numbers etched so faint they were almost invisible. A time. 2:17 a.m., the same time as the text I'd received weeks earlier. Beneath it, another word, shelf. I asked what it meant. Josh said he used to leave things behind in libraries, tucked between books, folded into maps. Sometimes I thought if I hid parts of the truth in plain sight, he said they'd last longer than I would. The next day, Alvarez and I drove to the downtown branch. It was quiet, half-lit, like it always was in the morning. We went to the history section, shelf 217. Tucked behind an old atlas was a sealed envelope, brittle at the edges. Inside was a photocopy of a missing poster I'd never seen before. A girl from Wilmington, disappeared in 2008. Same profile as the others, same absence of leads. Josh didn't remember her name, but he recognized her face. "She worked a shift at the grill one night," he said. "We shared a meal, talked about getting to the coast." He looked down. "Next morning she was gone. I thought she'd just moved on. I didn't ask." My mother whispered something under her breath. Alvarez stared at the poster for a long time. "She's not listed in the database I've been using," he said, "which means we've got holes we didn't know existed." Back home, Josh pulled another drawing from his bag. A narrow corridor, a door with no handle. Just a blank space where one should have been. He said he'd sketched it from memory after a night spent sleeping behind a laundromat. "I heard voices," he said. "A low hum, like someone talking behind glass." I took the sketchbook from him, flipped back through every page I'd seen already, and finally noticed something that stopped me cold. One drawing had been smudged at the corner. I held it to the light. Beneath the smear was a faint outline of a circle, not part of the street, not a lamp, just a mark, repeated in 3 other drawings, always in the lower right corner, always in the same size. I showed Alvarez. He compared them all, said nothing for a while. Then he said, "This wasn't just a map, it's a ledger. He's been tracking something." My dad walked in, then saw us all standing around the table, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't ask what we were doing. He just sat down. Josh looked at me. I didn't know if any of it would matter. I shook my head. "You didn't have to. You drew it anyway." That night I sat by the porch light alone. The bulb glowed steady. I kept the sketchbook on my lap, and I waited not for it to blink, but for the next piece to make itself known. The circle marks showed up again 3 nights later. I wasn't looking for them. I'd already gone over every page of Josh's sketchbook twice, maybe 3 times. But when I took a photo of one particular drawing, an alley framed by 2 dumpsters and a flickering exit sign, the flash caught something I hadn't noticed before. Low in the corner, almost blending into the inkwork, was another faint circle. Same size, same placement. But this one had a small triangle sketched through it. I asked Josh if he remembered drawing that symbol. He looked at the photo for a long time before shaking his head. Maybe I didn't mean to. Some nights I'd trace shapes without thinking, just to stay awake. He paused. But that triangle, that means something. I saw it. I just don't know where. Alvarez leaned in. Try to place the alley. Was it Boone, Durham? Maybe farther west? Josh furrowed his brow and slowly nodded. Winston-Salem, maybe. I was working back of house at a diner that summer. Slept 2 blocks down behind a supply shop. One night I cut through an alley I hadn't used before. Something about it felt wrong. No sound, no trash smell. Just cold air and a locked service door with a symbol scratched near the bottom. I think that's when I started seeing the sedan again. The triangle sat like a thread we couldn't pull yet, but it tugged at the edge of everything. We searched public records, but nothing relevant turned up. Property owners had changed too many times. Alvarez said the symbol could have been gang-related or part of a private code used by whoever had been shadowing Josh all these years. Whatever it meant, it wasn't graffiti. It was deliberate, precise, cut into surfaces the way you'd mark inventory. I started cataloging every sketch that included a circle. There were 12 in total. 8 had triangle overlays. 1 had an X. I kept notes on location guesses, drawn surroundings, even temperature notations Josh sometimes jotted in the margins. None of it felt connected until the 12th sketch. A quiet one of an overpass lit by 2 dim street lamps drawn entirely in graphite with only a single caption, "Not alone." I flipped it over and found something even stranger. A list of initials, no dates. Just 9 names reduced to letters handwritten tight and even in the upper corner. Josh saw me reading it and closed the book with more force than necessary. "Those aren't victims," he said. "They're placeholders. People I knew or might have known. I wasn't keeping score. I was trying to stay sane." I asked what the X meant in the earlier sketch. His hand hovered over the table for a while before he answered. That one, he said, was the only place I saw someone else running. He looked up. Not from me. From the same car. That shifted something in Alvarez. He stood, walked to the board, and pinned the overpass sketch next to the other drawings. "Then someone else survived," he said. "Maybe. Maybe they're still out there." The next day we drove to that overpass. It was outside Greensboro. Took us 2 hours with traffic. Josh didn't speak the whole way. When we parked, he pointed to the support beam at the far end. "That's where I slept," he said. "For 3 nights in July 2013. The concrete still bore faint discoloration where the drawing's shadow lines had been placed. Josh crouched low, ran his fingers along a stretch of wall near the base. There, he said, A mark barely visible. The triangle again. This time carved, not drawn. Alvarez snapped photos, dusted the surface lightly with black powder from a small kit he'd brought along. "Clean," he said. "Too old to lift anything." We searched the area for other symbols but found none. Still, something about the air under that overpass didn't sit right. It was colder than it should have been for that time of year. Alvarez kept glancing behind us like he expected someone to be watching. Josh sat on the curb across the road, sketchbook in his lap, not drawing, just staring at the same spot on the asphalt like he was waiting for something to return. When we got home, the porch light was off. No one had touched the switch. My mother swore she'd left it on. The bulb hadn't blown. No circuit had tripped. It just wasn't lit. Alvarez checked the wiring again, the extension cord from the earlier trap still tucked neatly beneath the hedges. "No signs of tampering. They're close," he said. "But they're not ready yet." That light was a test. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with the sketchbook open across my knees, the pages catching lamplight as I flipped slowly through them. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard a knock. Not on the front door, on my bedroom window. I didn't move at first. Just sat frozen, hand gripping the edge of the sketchbook. Another knock. Then silence. When I looked through the blinds, no one was there. But something had been left on the sill, a slip of paper folded once, held down by a rock. I opened the window carefully, pulled it in. The paper had one line typed, "You're not looking at the right house." I brought it straight to Alvarez. He studied it in silence. "That's not a threat," he said. "That's a push." We pulled the city records again, this time not for the diner or the supply shop. We looked at the structure adjacent to the alley in Josh's Winston-Salem sketch, the one he'd passed through that night. He felt something off. That address had been listed as condemned in 2008, then sold in 2010 under a trust with no public name. The building was small, a 2-story red brick with boarded windows, but its basement level had once connected through a shared tunnel to another parcel 2 lots down. That parcel had since been rezoned, converted into a self-storage facility in 2014. No mention of the tunnel in the application, no records of demolition. Alvarez sat back and rubbed his jaw. If they moved operations, he said, they didn't wipe their history. They buried it. Josh looked at the address, then at me. That's where I heard the humming. He was sure. The corridor, the sealed door, the low buzz like voices behind glass. It all pointed to that space, a place that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. We called it in, but Alvarez kept it quiet. No patrol cars, no visible presence. Just one unmarked cruiser parked a block away, watching, waiting. That night, the porch light flicked on again. None of us had touched the switch. And in the kitchen, sitting neatly on top of the closed sketchbook, was a Polaroid. A picture of our family, standing in the front yard the day before me, Josh, my parents, Alvarez, slightly out of frame. None of us had seen a camera. The picture had been taken from across the street. The porch light glowed faintly in the background. I turned it over. On the back, a neat black marker. This isn't about what he saw, it's about who didn't. That was the moment I realized this was never just about Josh running. It was about everything that had stayed behind, everything that had been allowed to go unseen. The photo stayed on the table all night. Nobody moved it. Nobody said anything about it in the morning either. We just circled around it in the kitchen like it was some kind of warning we weren't sure how to read yet. My father cleared his throat, once started to ask if maybe one of us had taken it ourselves, some kind of weird experiment maybe. But the silence that followed shut that theory down before it went anywhere. Alvarez barely touched his coffee. Josh sat at the counter with his head low and didn't eat. Around 9:30, Alvarez got a call from the cruiser posted near the old Winston-Salem tunnel site. The officer on duty had seen a figure approach the edge of the condemned lot around 2:17 a.m., but by the time he got out of the car, the person was gone. No vehicle, no footprints, no motion alerts from the street cams. Alvarez didn't say much when he hung up. He just looked at the photo again and said, "They're still using it, or watching to see who might." He didn't wait for backup this time. Said it was better if we kept this quiet, less chance of scaring off whoever was operating in the space. We drove out just before noon. My mom didn't want us to take Josh, but he insisted, and Alvarez didn't argue. Said Josh remembered more than anyone, even if he didn't know it yet. The self-storage building looked ordinary gray siding keypad entry office closed for the day. But 2 lots over the old brick building still stood behind a rusted chain-link fence with a no trespassing sign worn nearly blank. The boards on the windows hadn't been replaced in years, and a section of the foundation showed a clean rectangular cut just above the dirt line. Alvarez pointed it out. "That's the tunnel access," he said, capped with concrete but not deep. We circled the perimeter until we found a loose panel at the rear corner. It was a tight fit, but we slipped through and made our way to the edge of the condemned lot. The dirt was hard-packed weeds, dry and yellowed. Alvarez pulled out a small hand trowel and began testing the base of the wall. After maybe 10 minutes, he stopped. "Listen," he said. We were quiet. Then, barely audible, a low hum. Not mechanical, not quite electrical either. More like something pulsing from underground, deep and rhythmic, like pressure moving through a sealed space. Josh stepped back. "That's it," he said. "That's what I heard that night. Same sound, same pace." We marked the spot, covered it again, and returned to the car. Alvarez called in a favor to a contact in county utilities. Said we needed blueprints of the site, old ones pre-2010 if possible. The man promised to look and call back. We waited at a diner 2 blocks down. Josh didn't speak much, just watched people come and go through the plate glass window. Around 3:00 p.m., Alvarez's phone buzzed. The contact had found something. An original permit from 1995 showed a sub-basement level in the brick building listed as a storm utility crawl, but there was a handwritten correction note in the margin connects to B3 lot, dual entry, verify access protocol. B3 was the parcel that became the storage facility. The tunnel wasn't a rumor, it had been active, and someone had flagged it even then. We headed back with a bolt cutter and a narrow flashlight. Alvarez didn't want Josh underground, so I stayed with him near the fence while Alvarez went alone. He slipped into the storage lot first, scaled the fence line where it dipped near a drainage trench, and disappeared behind the north wall. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Josh paced a few feet at a time, always looking toward the fence. Then, just as I was about to call Alvarez, my phone buzzed. 1 photo. No message. The image showed a metal hatch with worn paint half covered by a rubber mat. Beside it was a scrap of paper held in place by a rusted wrench. On the paper, 3 words. Not this one. Alvarez emerged 10 minutes later, his face pale. "The hatch isn't locked," he said, "but it's rigged. Pressure alarm or weight sensor, can't be sure." He handed me the note. It was left for someone, not us. They're trying to steer whoever's coming next. That night, we laid everything out on the kitchen table. The sketches, the symbols, the initials, the porch light codes, the humming, the triangle, the Polaroid. And now this note left like bait. Josh finally spoke. "They're training someone," he said. "Whoever left that message. They're not trying to stop this. They're trying to continue it." I asked what he meant. He didn't look at me. "I wasn't the first one who got marked," he said quietly. "I was just the one who kept moving." His hands shook. There were others. I saw one, under the church steps in Missouri. She wouldn't come out, just kept repeating the same word, replaced. He looked up at us. "I think that's what they're doing. Replacing people, testing them, leaving just enough behind that no one notices the difference." I didn't know what to say. None of us did. It sounded too strange, too paranoid, but somehow every piece fit. Not as a clean puzzle, but like scattered pages of a manual torn into fragments. That night I found something else. Not outside. Not from them. From Josh. I'd gone into the garage looking for batteries and spotted his old hiking pack by the shelf. Something about the way it sagged made me open it. Inside, tucked between two shirts, was a cassette recorder. The kind from the late 90s. Black plastic. Duct tape across the battery compartment. I checked the cassette inside. It had a label written in Josh's tight block letters, Unit B 2016. I brought it into the house and set it on the counter. He stared at it for a long time. Then he nodded. Play it. The tape clicked to life and static filled the room. Then a voice, Josh's younger, breathless whispering in the dark. I'm in the tunnel. Not sure how deep. Lights went out 10 minutes ago. There's a room ahead. I can hear someone breathing. Not me. Not close. Just steady. Like they don't know I'm here. Or like they do, but don't care. There was a long silence. Then footsteps. Josh's voice again, panicked now. There's a mirror. Or something like one. But it's wrong. It's not reflecting me. It's showing someone else. Someone just standing there like they're waiting for a signal. I think the tape snapped. The audio cut off clean. Alvarez rewound it, played it again. Same result. It ended mid-sentence. We sat there not speaking, not moving. The tape was old, but the fear in that voice wasn't. Josh sat back slowly, hands in his lap. That wasn't a mirror, he said. It was glass. One way. They were watching me, watching how I reacted. Outside, the porch light flickered again. This time we didn't go check. That porch light didn't flicker again for the rest of the night. We sat in the kitchen until just past 2 in the morning, not really talking, just listening. Occasionally a car would pass on the county road tires, hissing through gravel, but nothing stopped and nothing looked back. The cassette recorder sat between us on the table, still warm from playback. Josh wouldn't touch it. He didn't even look at it. Just said quietly, I think it's time. Alvarez nodded, and the next morning he made the call. Not to local PD this time, not even to state. He contacted someone in the Justice Department, a name he didn't give us, but someone he said he trusted. The man arrived in an unmarked truck the following day. Dark coat, no badge shown, no last name offered. Just introduced himself as Langley and asked to see the materials. We gave him everything. The sketches, the cassette, the photo, the Polaroids, the symbols from the porch light pattern, the sound recordings from Josh's old phone, even the handwritten list of initials from the storage unit registry. Langley took his time with it all, didn't ask many questions, just listened. Then he set the recorder down and said, This isn't isolated. He didn't elaborate, not fully. But he said the agency had flagged a cluster of similar cases going back to the late 80s. Not identical, not linked by geography, but connected by process. Behavior modifications, conditioning signals, sightings of ghost residents, individuals who appeared where someone else should have been. Neighbors who remembered a different family living in the same house a week earlier. Missing persons reports withdrawn by parents who later denied ever filing them. Duplicates. Langley said the word flatly like it was a term he'd used before in briefings. I asked him what it meant, what exactly they were duplicating. Patterns, he said. Memory structures, behavioral triggers. In some cases, people. He opened a folder and pulled out a scan of one of Josh's sketches, the figure by the edge of the lake drawn when he was 10. Langley slid it across the table. This one's shown up in 6 states under different names, he said. Always peripheral. Always near a missing person event. Never formally identified, never arrested, never documented entering or leaving. Then he placed a second page down. This one had a mugshot black and white stamped with a date from 2002. We think this man was the original, or maybe just the first one who stopped following the program. His name wasn't printed, just a case number. I asked what happened to him. Langley didn't answer, just folded the folder closed and said, "We're not asking you to continue, but if you choose to know that you're not wrong, and you're not alone." He left the next morning taking only copies of what we gave him. Said he'd push it forward, but we shouldn't expect updates. Alvarez seemed to accept that. Josh didn't. That night he brought me outside. We walked the perimeter of the property, slowly ending near the garage where the old wind chime still hung from the eave. I remembered something he said. "It's not from here. Not from this house." He pointed toward the tool shed at the back edge of the yard. "There's something buried behind that wall. I didn't put it there, but I remember finding it. I remember seeing my name on it even though I hadn't written it." The next morning we dug. Carefully. The soil was dry, a little rocky, but shallow. About 3 feet down we found a small tin box, rusted at the hinges, taped shut with a layer of faded masking tape. Josh peeled it open slowly. Inside was a note folded 3 times. It said in ballpoint pen, "Ask for Hollow Point." He still remembers. Use the phrase, "First echo, second silence." Beneath the note was a key. Standard house key, nothing unique except for the engraved marking on the head. A single triangle filled in black. Same symbol Josh had drawn over and over as a kid. Same one we'd seen in the photo from the surveillance lot. Josh took the key in his hand and closed his eyes. "That's the door," he whispered. "I don't know where it is, but I've seen it. Not from the outside, from the other side." He didn't say anything else for a while. Just stared toward the trees beyond the fence where the woods thickened and the air always felt a little colder. That evening, Alvarez made one last call to a private contact in West Virginia. Said the man might know something about the phrase in the note. They hadn't spoken in over 10 years. The call went to voicemail. Alvarez left no details, just said, "Tell him it's Mendoza. Tell him the name Hollow Point came back up." He hung up and looked at us. "If he responds, it won't be through the phone." That night, the porch light turned on by itself. No one had flipped the switch. No one had walked near the sensor. It just clicked on at 2:13 a.m. sharp and stayed lit for exactly 5 minutes. We watched from the window. No car passed. No figure moved in the shadows. But when the light finally blinked off, the hum returned. Faint at first, then deeper, like something underneath had just been activated again. Josh didn't say anything. He just walked to the front door, opened it without hesitation, and stepped out onto the porch like he knew the exact pattern he was supposed to follow, like he'd done it before. And somewhere not far off, a second porch light answered. Josh didn't come back inside that night. He sat on the porch until morning, elbows on his knees, watching the dark like he was waiting for a signal. When I stepped out just after sunrise, he turned to me and said, "I think I've been doing this longer than I know. Not just remembering it, but living it." He didn't mean it like a metaphor. He meant it literally. We didn't talk much after that. The days moved slower and everything felt a little thinner, like we'd stepped through something and couldn't quite get back. Alvarez packed up a week later. He left us the files, his notes, even the recorder. Said he'd had his fill of watching people disappear in plain sight. We stayed in touch, but I could tell he didn't want to be pulled back in. Josh and I kept the house. There wasn't much reason to, but neither of us could bring ourselves to leave it unattended. That light still flickers some nights, but never in the same pattern. And no one answers it anymore. A few months passed before we heard anything from West Virginia. A letter arrived, no return address, just a folded piece of paper inside. It said, "He remembers. He's willing to talk. Find the path between Echo Ridge and Second Hollow. The door is still there. No signature, no instructions." But Josh read it once and nodded like it made perfect sense. He's planning to go this fall. I told him I'd drive. Whether we actually find the door or just another version of the same silence, I can't say. But I've learned something through all this, and it's not about solving anything. It's about keeping track. The people who vanish in slow ways. Not just off the streets or into locked rooms, but out of memory, out of language, out of who we're supposed to be when someone says our name. They don't always want to go. Sometimes they're rewritten, sometimes they're replaced, and sometimes the only proof they ever existed is whatever you can hold on to: an old drawing, a recorded voice, a porch light no one wired. I don't know who's running it. I don't know what they're trying to build out of all these fractured lives. But I know this: we're not alone. And none of it's random. Someone out there is listening, recording, watching for the moment a person forgets who they were supposed to be. And someone else is out there trying to remember. If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll share it so no one gets erased without a name left behind.